everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. I'm your host, Jace. We're up to the second day of the 12 days of the Comic Source, so hope everyone's having a joyous and happy holiday season. As always, on Wednesdays, Creator on Spotlight, and I have a couple of creators here to talk about their book. I discovered it at Los Angeles Comic-Con. It's absolutely fantastic. A lot of nostalgia, for someone like me, grew up in the 80s. So Shawn Boyd and Elijah Henry are here to tell us about their book called Winona Forever. So we'll start with you, Shawn. Give us a quick intro, and we'll let you drop the elevator pitch for the book as well.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Shawn Patrick Boyd, and I'm a writer. I've been a copywriter in advertising for a long time, and done some other things, as we do in life. We have chapters, but always been a storyteller and writer. And then, wrote a screenplay called Winona Forever. And during the pandemic, I thought, probably not a lot of movies going to get made for a while. So let me try to shift gears. I want to keep this rolling along, and thought, what if I rewrite this as a graphic novel? And so I did that. And, here we are today. We've got 2 parts of 4 in this series already done, which is really exciting. And just a quick overview, like you said, what's the elevator pitch for this thing? So Winona Forever is about 4 teenage misfits who have to find a powerful relic that they believe is hidden in their otherwise really boring hometown. And they need to find it before this dangerous secret society does. So it's a bit of a nod to Goonies from the 80s, back to your comment about nostalgia, Jace, but also Stranger Things of today, which I feel like owes a lot to Goonies and stories like that. So, if you like either of those 2 stories, you'll probably also enjoy Winona Forever.
Cool. Elijah, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how you came to be a part of the project?
Yeah, of course. My name is Elijah, and I met Shawn through a mutual friend. I worked with this particular friend on a website in a very short time span, and she recommended me to him, and he reached out to me through my website and told me about this story, which just the synopsis already kind of brought me in. Just an adventure story, a fun Indiana Jones, Goonies inspired story. And I usually do a lot of horror work, a lot of scary artwork and stories. So to be given the opportunity to work on something a little different, to challenge myself, that was already super interesting to me. But then I got this script eventually from Shawn, and I think we agreed on reading a few pages and then me getting back to him. And I ended up reading the whole thing because I was just engrossed with it. And I just could imagine what the characters looked like. I was just super excited to bring some of those characters to life in some way. And so we did some character designs to start off with. I think you can see a few of them behind Shawn there. The very first times that I ever drew those characters, and once we both kind of saw what those looked like, I think we were both really excited to start the project. So yeah, like Shawn said, we got 2 parts in the works. Part 3 is days away from being completed. I'm working on it as we speak. And yeah, it's been super exciting, and I'm super grateful for this experience and for Shawn's partnership.
Cool. Well, Shawn, this is a classic formula, right? Like we see it so many, going back to the Little Rascals, even, Goonies, we mentioned Stranger Things, this group of kids get together and they go on an adventure. And certainly it speaks to that age group, because I remember when I was, that age, 12, 13, whatever, you wanted adventure, you wanted excitement. Life seemed so boring, and now all of us, of course, would love to be able to go back to those carefree days of, not having bills and jobs and responsibilities and whatnot.
Yeah.
But let's go over the characters, because they're each
Sure.
sort of unique. So give us your kind of breakdown of each of the individual characters. Obviously, in brief, we won't go too spoilery and want people to discover for themselves. But and then we'll give Elijah a chance to talk about design of each of the characters.
Yeah. For those that are watching on screen, you can kind of see a little grid here, and then behind Jace too. But for those of you that aren't on screen, we'll do a quick description. So there are 4 principal characters in it. And again, they're 4 teenagers. They're all around 13 or 14. So they're in 8th grade. And I said it at that point because that was a really formative time in my life, 8th grade. It was a really tough time. and I really felt like an outsider and that I didn't fit in. But I had a little tight group of friends, and somehow we as misfits did sort of fit in with one another. We used to play a role-playing game called Star Frontiers, which, kind of a Dungeons and Dragons-esque game, but in space. And we did that every day at lunch. So took some inspiration from that. But our four characters, principal in Winona Forever, are Boots, who is a 13-year-old girl, and she's kind of the leader of the group. She is super tough. She doesn't let anybody, mess with anyone in her group. Now, she is a little harsh sometimes on her friends, as we can be with our own group of friends, but no one else can do that. So she's a loyal, actually kind of a real softie underneath. As you go along, you see that tough exterior is really masking a really soft underbelly. But Boots, she's so called because she actually wears boots. As kids, I kind of took inspiration for the fact that, like, as a kid, we always had nicknames for each other, and they're always fairly obvious, like about something that you did, like if you ate Snickers bars all the time, you might get the nickname Snickers, right? So I didn't want to make the names too complex. I was like, well, Boots, she wears Doc Marten boots. She's a bit ahead of her time in both her music taste and just her kind of experience in the world. So she wears an REM t-shirt. And in 1987, if you wore an REM t-shirt, you would have been on the cutting edge. They weren't, yet a known band the way they became in the 90s, and they became huge. So she is on the cutting edge of music and such. And then we've got Darby. And the story Darby is sort of the launching point for the story. He's sort of the reason they have to go on the adventure. Something happens to someone he loves, and they believe that this relic is the thing that is going to save the day. So Darby is, again, kind of the engine of the story. He's sort of our every kid in it as well. But kind of a few specifics about him. He is really he's kind of a brainiac, as all of these kids are. They're really smart, which is one of the reasons they're called the outcasts, because they do get picked on for being so smart. But Darby really knows Latin really well. That's one of his things that it kind of makes him stand out, and that comes into play in the book specifically. Because, what 8th grade kid knows Latin? I had to take Latin every day in 7th grade, so it's a little bit he's based upon me there.
I wonder if that's why he's my favorite,
Really?
You're such a great guy, Shawn. Darby he speaks to me. That's the one that I relate to. Being outcast for always having the answer, You're
Yes.
the kid in class. God, why does he always put his head? Why does he always know the answer? Shut up.
Yes. No, it's true. I in 8th grade, I just, one thing that really got stung, and it's funny looking back in retrospect, but I had a kid in my class because I moved to a new school, new town. And she said, I think you're a robot created by the administration to destroy the curve. And at the time, now I think it's hilarious. At the time, I was really hurt by it because I did feel like an outsider, and it was just further evidence that people thought, I was an outsider and bad for it. And then the last two, maybe coming to my favorites here, Sci-Fi, who is so named because he loves sci-fi, he loves science fiction, and he also loves science. Sci-Fi doesn't believe in anything that can't be proven by science. So any supernatural, he has a reason for, he can explain why, phenomenon exist. And that's part of his journey in the book is he finds that maybe there are some things that don't necessarily fit in with science. And that's kind of the journey that he goes on. And also the other journey he goes on is he has a love interest that is kind of unexpected for him. And it's also, he doesn't quite know what he's feeling. So that's part of, his storyline too, kind of drawn from that wonderful time when, you're 13, 14 and you're experiencing feelings for someone for the first time, and you're not quite sure what to do with it or what it means, or if they like you. So there's a bit of a, excitement to that. And Sci-Fi, he's kind of the lens through which we're seeing that really. And then lastly, there's Pretty Boy. And Pretty Boy gets his nickname because he loves style and fashion. He doesn't mind that people call him Pretty Boy. He embraces it. It's a badge of honor. So Pretty Boy is this kind of a lovely character, someone that's kind of self-possessed at a young age, knows who they are, and they're okay with, not really fitting in. And then Pretty Boy, he loves a couple things most in life. The first one is Winona Ryder, who is from Winona, Minnesota, which is where the story takes place and where I'm from. So Winona Ryder gets her name from Winona, Minnesota, where she was born. And in the book, Pretty Boy says Winona Ryder is going to come back one day and become his girlfriend. And of course, this is a dream that things that we say as teenagers, and they're his friends are like, you're dreaming. That's never going to happen. But he's certain it will. So Winona Ryder, and then he also loves George Michael, the musician, singer George Michael, and which also, a 13-year-old boy at that age liking George Michael would probably be, this is very unexpected. So I don't want to spoil too much about, what happens with all that, but suffice it to say, Pretty Boy brings a lot of humor through just his own antics, and through his unusualness, and he's a real kind of heart of the book in many ways.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. I mean, obviously that's part of where the title comes from, Winona Forever. She certainly was breaking in at that time, and Beetlejuice and all that, and being very well known, and it all circles back with her, being a part of the cast of Stranger Things, which it's so cool that all sort of serendipitous in a way.
No, it really is. It's sort of strange how those things are all folding in on each other, and it's been fun to really play with that. And back to Winona herself, like at that time, Winona, Minnesota was probably 20,000 people. It's a really small town, not a lot happening. And so for someone like me that didn't feel like they fit in and always felt like there's some place out there for me, this town doesn't necessarily fit me. The idea that Winona Ryder was becoming the star and she was from this town gave me hope. So in many ways, she's sort of like a patron saint or beacon for the kids in the book, because she was for me also.
Well, hopefully she hears about the book and checks it out. So it would be great to have like a pull quote from Winona Ryder, right?
Right. No, that would be super cool. I would be really honored. Like, hopefully, she would feel honored, because that's kind of part of the point of the book. It doesn't really center around her, but it certainly is. She's definitely it's an homage in some ways, a soft homage to her, what she represented.
Well, Elijah, talk to us a little bit about coming up with the designs for the characters. How much did Shawn already have laid out? How much did you get to bring to it? And were these characters you were able to nail with kind of the first design, or did you have to kind of go through several iterations to kind of get it right?
Yeah, I mean, when I first read through the script, I kind of had my own idea of what the characters were going to look like. And I think those ideas were refined with Shawn's help. What Shawn managed to do throughout the book, which has been really cool, is create Pinterest boards for certain characters. So Sci-Fi will have some images, the calculator watch, which you can see sometimes throughout the book. Boots will have her headphones. You'll see the Walkman sometimes. He provided images of that. And so I was able to sort of merge my idea for those characters, the vision I was seeing, with those details and those elements that just kind of enriched it, I think. And I think it was funny because we just about nailed Darby and Sci-Fi, I think, right off the bat. It was Pretty Boy and Boots that took a little more tweaking. And there's original designs that maybe we'll share with everyone one day that are just fun to see after the fact, because I think Pretty Boy had his hair all the way slicked back, and he looked very sort of, he didn't quite look as fun and stylish as he does now. And Boots kind of looked a little more disheveled and a little more, maybe she was more intimidating looking, and it's little things like that we were able to collaborate with, and little details that made things work a little more. Like Shawn talked about how Boots maybe was wearing this oversized jacket rather than wearing like a a normal fitting jacket to kind of highlight the fact that she is still, she's still a little girl, but she's kind of fronting a little bit and she's trying to be a little more mature, even though she still has a lot of growing to do. And same with Pretty Boy. Maybe he probably, as this character developed, he looked a little more, I don't want to say ridiculous isn't the right word, but a little more like, ostentatious. Maybe you could tell that he was really putting a lot of work into his look. And I think as the books go on, we really kind of, we put a lot of highlight on that. So yeah, it was super fun. I love being able to read a script and being able to see the characters and being able to develop them. And with the collaboration that we did, it just sort of became second nature at some point.
Was it a challenge? Obviously, we talked about this book being set in the 80s and the nostalgia. So you've got to have little details that, pull us back. I certainly had a calculator watch. I certainly had a Walkman. So talk a little bit about the challenge of doing that, but also making sure that it feels modern. I mean, you want to be nostalgic. You want to have it in that setting, but visually you want to be sure that it's not kind of stagnant and it's not an old kind of style, right? You still want it to feel modern. Is that kind of tough to find that balance?
It was a little tough in the beginning, just because wasn't alive in the 80s, obviously. I always say that I've never seen a Walkman in person. Maybe up until recently.
Doesn't that make you feel old like me, Shawn?
Oh, in a way, but then there's also kind of a delight in it. Like, oh my God, like he's never seen a Walkman. And it was kind of fun, Jace, because then I also got to like you said, with the Pinterest boards, I got to show him things in the script that I was talking about. And I was like, okay, yeah, here's what the posters would have looked like in their classroom at the time, and things like that. So it was a good walk down memory lane for me.
Cool. Go ahead, Elijah. We didn't mean to interrupt.
No. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like it was fun too, because I sort of bring a style. My natural style is very comic booky, very sort of rooted in Tim Sale's, one of my favorite artists. I take a lot of inspiration from him. Very, very large, dark shadow shapes kind of throughout pages. And I was sort of able to bring a little bit of that, which I feel modernizes the look of a graphic novel or a comic book, and then create some of those details that Shawn was able to provide. I think it's a great example of those posters in the classroom, because if you look closely, those are hand-drawn. I took the reference that Shawn provided. There's a Yoda one that says, read you must or something. And I was able to kind of recreate those by hand. And it just adds another flavor of this is what things looked like back then. And even though I wasn't around for that, I think people who maybe were in classrooms at that point in time might see that and think about, reminisce a little bit. So I'm hoping that moments like that, combined with sort of just the expertise I have as a budding graphic novelist, helps kind of blend those elements together.
Well, what I find interesting, you mentioned Tim Sale. So many of his books, when you talk about the setting, they're very much sort of timeless, right? Like in terms of visual style, that's a style that's never going to get stagnant. But a lot of times, especially in his work with Jeff Loeb, they're set in certain time periods. Daredevil yellows in the 60s. Same thing with Spider-Man blue, and that sort of thing. And his Batman work is probably a little earlier than that, more gothic. So it's certainly, I think, a challenge, but one that's great to aspire to set it in a certain time period, but still have that visual style that's going to stand the test of time. The other thing about that, in terms of setting it in a certain time period, Shawn, in a way, the time period itself becomes a character, right? It becomes, kind of the overall setting that we can relate to, just like, I relate to, sci-fi, or I relate to Darby. I bring something else to it because I have those memories. But somebody coming into it new, they're learning about this setting sort of just as they learn about the characters. Is that a challenge to make sure you give enough kind of detail, but not get lost in the minutia of the 80s, for example?
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that's a great question. It was something I definitely thought about, because for this book, I really wanted to write it for all ages as much as possible. So I wanted people like you and me who lived during this period to get something out of the book and enjoy it and not think, oh yeah, that was a great book, but it's for young kids. But then to be able to, kids 8, 10 to read it and understand was a challenge. And so I think the beauty of graphic novels, comics, is that there's so much context because you've got an image that tells a lot of story. And then when you combine it with what people are saying, or a caption, it adds to it. And so there's words in there that kids of today wouldn't necessarily know. And sometimes even regional slang that I incorporated into the book because I wanted to be really specific. But I think because of the, visuals, the context, et cetera, that they're able to make sense of it. So, like a word like grody gunk, that comes a little bit later. Like we don't use the word grody anymore, but hopefully with the context, you go, oh, okay, even as a kid should be able to understand. But you're right. I never wanted it to be overwhelming that it was just like, so much 80s that it overwhelms the story. The 80s is like a flavor, in the mix, but it's like it's a complementary flavor, within the stew of the book, rather than, oh, wow, that's a lot of 80s. So yeah, no, it was definitely something I thought about a lot.
Now, Elijah, the antagonist in the book, this secret society, and you mentioned kind of your affinity for horror. You could have gone like all the way off the board, terrifying images, really scary stuff. It's not really the aesthetic you were going for. So was that was that fun for you to kind of dial back your proclivities to do really scary stuff and kind of set it in a more comic booky all ages style?
100%. It was super fun. I always love taking risks with my artwork and with whatever projects I take on. And I felt at the time when we first started doing this book that it would be risky for me to try something very different than what I usually do. And my sort of knee-jerk reaction in terms of drawing something on a blank piece of paper is to draw something a little more frightening. So when we finally did get to those pages where we had to introduce the villain, it was kind of fun to strike up that balance. Say, okay, I need to create a character that's intimidating, that looks a little frightening, but I can't go all out. I can't make him, look like this ghoul lurking in the shadows. I can't, we have kids reading this that are gonna, want to throw the book out the window.
Of nightmare.
Yeah, I don't want that. So it was fun to sort of just get a touch of that sort of that creepiness and bring it to that. And you see that sometimes throughout the book. I think with Beck was a funny addition because when we were first developing Beck, Shawn wasn't quite sure what Beck was going to look like. And I ended up bringing Boris Karloff to the table as inspiration. And that's kind of where he became one of my favorite characters to draw, just because he's sort of this ghoulish, out of place looking character. And his role in the book is very interesting and fun. So yeah, it's challenging, but in the best, most gratifying way.
Cool. Well, Shawn, if people want to get the book, right? Like you kickstarted, if I'm not mistaken, you kickstarted the first 2 volumes. I imagine a Kickstarter is coming for volume 3, right? And they'll have opportunities to get the first 2. But what if they don't want to wait? There's other ways to get the book right now, right? Yeah.
You can get the book. You can get parts 1 and 2, which are the 2 available right now at winonaforeverbooks.com. So if you just even if you search for Winona Forever graphic novel, you'll find it. But winonaforeverbooks.com. And then, like you were saying, Jace, yeah, we'll definitely do a Kickstarter for the last 2 parts 3 and 4. And I think we'll do part 3 in February. So the Kickstarters have been awesome. We've been kind of building a community through that. And then, people get the book sooner than kind of the general public by joining the Kickstarter. And then they find out, updates more quickly than others. So yeah. WinonaForeverBooks.com.
Great. I'll put a link in the show notes, everybody, to the site if you want to go and pick up volumes 1 and 2 before the next Kickstarter. And actually, my next question was going to be about community, and Shawn mentioned it. So, Elijah, how's the reaction been? How has it been seeing this, kind of take on a life of its own out in the world?
It's been super cool. I would say that at this point in my life, I haven't really been involved in any projects that have kind of come back to me in this way. I've had a lot of friends and family supporting the project, of course, but I've had people that I've never met kind of complimenting my work and just being very kind and very sort of excited about the book, which was sort of something that we dreamed about. Would people be excited about this story? Would people want to keep reading? And it helps too when you're drawing these books, because any comic book artist will tell you that it's, it can be work that wears you down sometimes. But to know that there's people out there that really want to read this and are excited about it, it's super encouraging. So it's just been a great experience to hear all the positive feedback.
Fantastic. Well, as we're winding up here, Shawn, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you online if they want to follow your work, and anything else you want to share with our listeners or viewers?
Oh yeah. Instagram's probably the best place, and I'm Shawn Patrick Boyd on Instagram, and it's SHAWN. And that's the main place. I post a lot about the book and, just other things I find interesting in the world.
Fantastic. And what about you, Elijah?
You can reach me at eliartonline.com. That's sort of the best place to reach me. You can send me messages there. You can check out my work. You can also look at my work on Instagram. Same thing, Eli Art Online. You can also message me there and contact me. And if you're feeling up to it, I have a TikTok. Same thing, Eli Art Online. I post some work there, some videos. Posted a video about our Comic-Con experience if you want to check that out. So lots of fun stuff.
Well, fantastic. And we look forward to the new Kickstarter starting in the new year for Volume 3. Again, best of luck with the project, guys. It's fantastic. It speaks to me. Obviously, I'm a kid of the 80s, so I really enjoy it. And again, good luck. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you, Jace. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been awesome.
So to all you listeners, we want to thank you for your support as always, and we wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays in this holiday season. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.